So here we are for another edition of Motivation and Money. It's been a little while with me, Mark Terrell, and my co-host Fanny Snaith. How are you today, Fanny?
I am so good. Just come back from 3 weeks holiday, so I'm very, very, very happy.
Yeah, you've been on a bit of an adventure, haven't you? It's only 3 weeks. You've been. Do you want to tell us a little bit about what you've been up to?
I have just been to the United States of America, which is fun. Spent most of my time I spent all my time in New York State, apart from a couple of days in Canada when I went to see Niagara Falls. Um, just such an interesting place.
Yeah, sounds it.
Really, and so going from the power of Niagara Falls to the power of New York, Manhattan, and then taking steps in between, going through the
Mm.
States, such fascinating things. And spending Halloween in New York, which was
Okay. Well,
eye-opening.
I know they do. I mean, we're catching up a bit with Halloween. I remember going to America sort of decades ago and couldn't believe how big that Halloween was. But
Yeah,
I think
yeah,
we're almost getting to that, that almost to their level where we're sort of celebrating Halloween as much as we do with other things.
I absolutely hate it.
Yes.
No,
Yeah.
no, no, no. For me. It's like how to teach your child how to get diabetes in one easy lesson, and
Okay.
I think it should be banned.
Or the other way is, teaching them to threaten somebody, and if you don't do as I say, then I'm going to do something nasty.
But you know what? You
So
know what? You're not actually correct on that, because this was the thing. So I
right.
wanted to experience a Halloween in New York. So I as they were literally queuing up to the front door to come to my friend's house,
Mhm.
and they go trick or treat, and I say, okay, so what happens if I say trick?
Yeah.
And they said and I chose sort of young teenage girls to ask this.
Hmm.
I said, so what happens if I say trick? She goes, oh, we have to give you all our candy. And I went, all right then, trick. And they handed it over. And I was like, are you serious? Are you serious? Are you seriously telling me that you are actually now handing over all of your candy? And they went, yeah. I mean, clearly I didn't keep it, but that's what happened.
Oh,
And yes, apparently they will throw eggs at your window if you're not in and all that kind of stuff and blah, 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 blah. But I actually found it to be not what it seemed. But what I
okay.
did see that it seemed is that a lot of people were eating a lot of sugar, quite
Yeah.
unnecessarily.
Yeah. Well, that's the thing, isn't it? We had a tub of chocolates that gradually got given away over the evening. So it's just the way it is, isn't it? I don't think there's much harm in it, really, to be honest, as long as it's sort of managed with adults. We don't want it to get nasty, but it's a bit of fun. That's the end of the day, isn't it? So that's fabulous. I've had a week away, but doing something which is very what I needed, and that was just sitting by a pool and having the all-inclusive experience of just getting up and eating and then going back to my place. But in
How
that time, I didn't waste all that time. I read this book, and that's why we are talking about the topic today. This is a book by Morgan Housel. He previously wrote a book about the psychology of money, and so Fanny, you're well aware of his work, and I know
Mhm,
you're a bit of a fan. But
mhm.
it got me interested in that the the sort of topic of the book really is about where we are always looking for things that are going to change, but actually maybe we should spend more time actually realizing there's certain things that are always going to be always going to, or they're never going to change. They're the things that we can almost rely on happening. So
Hmm.
let's give you an example of that.
Yeah, because
And
I
again,
haven't read the book.
no, but there's concepts in here which are, it's not complicated. It's actually things that we should all bear in mind. So I'm going to give an example with regards to the stock market.
Dive
So,
in.
so the stock market is, as we know, we want it to grow, don't we? And we want it to see a steady growth.
Mhm.
But if that was always the case, if that was always the situation that we could always guarantee that the stock market is going up, that would not be healthy because all people what would happen is everyone just pour more and more money in it, and it become what we actually find happens on a fairly regular basis is that it has a correction, it has a downturn because of you know stock market becomes overinflated in prices because there's too much money in the system, so it has to have a correction. So
Mm.
we can always, one of the things is that we can guarantee that's going to happen because that's just the natural flow. And it's not that we should not invest in the stock market because that happens. It's about realizing that it's part of the journey. And if we're going to be investing in the stock market, we've just got to accept it happens now and again and not to panic ourselves into, oh my God, the stock market's crashed. I need to get my money out. Sometimes you need to have that long-term perspective because ultimately that's when it works for you. So there's an introduction, which is obviously right up your street, Fanny, because obviously the work you do with money. So I'd be interested on your perspective on what I've just said.
Well, I think, yeah. So, um, over the long term, over the long term, the
Mm.
long term,
Yeah.
I think we do generally believe that the stock market will rise in general.
Mm-hmm.
However, it's again, isn't it? And this is where this is really interesting. You can do different ways. So let's say, for instance, you were a real stock market fan or a trader, etc. And what you would do is you would laser in to what's happening maybe on the day, go in further, what's happening in the hour, go in further, what's happening in the 15 minutes, go in further, what's happening on the minute.
Mm-hmm.
And if we look at those time periods, so if we look at the general investor, which is I think what the book is talking about,
Mm-hmm.
they say, invest for a minimum of 10 years and you should be able to expect an increase along the way. So the fun part of it is that whereas Morgan Housel is right that when it goes up there will be a correction, yeah, but that's actually happening all the time.
Mm-hmm.
And the further you zoom out, like for instance, for 10 years, it says which 10 years are you looking at? So for instance, I looked at the FTSE, for instance, and going back into sort of the 80s, I can't remember the exact year that I took. And I took a snapshot of 10 years. And actually, that was pretty disappointing. And it was pretty much flatlined.
Mm-hmm.
So to say then that the stock market will grow over time would not be true. If you were then to laser down and do like Forex people, traders do, they're looking at things sort of on the minute or in the half an hour or the 15 minutes. And actually, if you think that the stock market is all it is people buying, selling, buying, selling, buying, selling, buying, selling based on opinion, it's actually going up and down all the time. And I think you'll probably find that the stock market ends up or down exactly the same amount of times over time on that particular.
Yeah, that's a good way of looking at it because, like I say, the stock market is bouncing up and down all the time. It's not
All the
it's
time.
just a thing that's just gradually growing up. So yeah,
It's
and
a
it's
tug
one
of
of those
war.
things, and it's the same now as it always has been. It's never going to change. That's the sort of
Same as it ever
concept.
was.
Hey,
Who's
same
that?
as it ever
David
was.
Byrne. Same as it ever was.
Indeed.
That's the song, isn't it?
Oh yes. I was trying to think of the
Talking
band.
Heads.
Talking Heads, of course. Yeah. So we get the principle here is the things that we can basically bet that will never change. So another thing to think about, which is one of the topics. And we're not going to go through obviously all the topics in the book. I recommend you reading the book for that. But so just another one that's interesting is that do you want someone else's life? So for instance, the reason why we're looking at this is that people might look at, for instance, someone like Elon Musk and say, "Oh God, I'd love to have what he's got, his wealth, and blah blah blah." But the question is, would you like everything that is about him as the person? Because let's remember here, the only reason why he's successful in whatever success means, it's because he is the person he is, and he's done the things he's done. And you can't have just the good bits. You've got to be the whole person. So when you think about someone and you look at someone and you'll sort of put them on a pedestal as to that person's amazing, the question you should ask is, do you want the whole of their life, or is it just the good bits you want? And
Which
isn't
is
that
why,
true about, that's what we tend to do, is look at the good bits and forget about the things that they've had to do or the things that aren't quite so savoury. Yeah?
which is why comparisonitis sucks.
Exactly.
And also, the other part of it is that, I mean, if you wanted to just transport your whole self into Elon Musk's complete, total, and utter capacity in the universe, one, obviously that's impossible. But the thing is, this is where it comes down to karma. We've all got our own karma. We've all got our own path. We've all got our own thing. So yeah, you've got it. Yeah, I mean, I don't know. Have you ever worked with somebody who you thought is amazing, and you go, "Oh my God, I'm so excited to work with this person, or follow this person, or whatever."
Yeah.
And the more that you get to know them, you start to see that, I mean, who knows? Maybe the Queen didn't flush the toilet.
We can't go down that route. She's not here to defend herself, but who knows? What Yes.
And this is the thing. It's like I mean, for me, when I read Michelle Obama's book, and
Yeah.
I love.
Yes,
Barack
I've read both the
Obama.
books. Yeah.
And and it's when she said that he was a smoker and he left his socks on the floor. You're like, going, no, that couldn't possibly happen.
Yeah.
But this is it. We're all human, right?
And we've got to remember that, and that's another thing that's never, it's always going to be the same. Is the people you only see the best parts in many respects, and it's just remember that it's the whole person that's got to where they are, and would you actually be prepared to do what they've done to get to where they are? And in most cases, probably you wouldn't, and that's why you're not in the position that they're in. Yeah.
Yeah. Well, and you just don't see the whole picture.
Yeah, and also it's a bit like, do you want to? It's like meeting your heroes. They say, don't never meet your heroes because
Yeah.
it'll take the shine off, and it's a bit like that, isn't it? Realizing actually, oh, I
Yeah.
really like that bit about them, but there's this I'm not quite so sure about, and that's one of the chapters is about understanding. There's always going to be a downside to someone that you really admire, and it's about understanding that you've got to accept the whole person for what they are. Otherwise, it's no point in just focusing on the good bits because it's
And
it's not.
and I suppose this is the same as looking at the stock market go up and down. There's always got to be a contrast. You can't have light without dark. You can't have right without left. You can't have up without down. The yin and the yang. It's just you can't. I mean, even an atom goes down to 50% positive and 50% negative, right?
Absolutely. Which is
So
another, well, it leads us nicely onto the balance between pessimism and optimism. We've got to always remember that we've got to use both, because if we're always optimistic, then that's going to lead us down a path of making rash decisions. We need to have a balance between optimism and pessimism. And when it's pessimism, is more about checking things and making sure you're doing your due diligence. That's where that pessimism is. Oh, hang on, is this really true? Is this what I'm maybe, let's say, an investment? Is this investment really what I'm seeing, or do I need to do a bit of check-in to make sure that it's all set up right and the person's running it is legitimate and all that sort of stuff. So having a balance of those two all the time with regards to investing is a good thing to have. And if we don't have them, and it's a bit like what I talk about with regards to leadership, you've got to have a balance between challenge and support. It's about having a balance, and if you're always challenging people and not supporting them, then that's not going to be good, and vice versa if you support them and don't challenge. So it's the thing here to remember is that you've got to have a balance in life, and that's how you progress. And if you get too top heavy on one, it tends to be when you get caught out.
There's a couple of things that come to mind when you mention that one, Mark, is one, I remember attending the Breakthrough Experience with Dr. John Demartini, and he talks a lot about contrast, as does Abraham Hicks, when she's talking about the contrast and the law of attraction and all that kind of malarkey. And he remembers that, he was like, you've always got to put a positive spin on things. And he suddenly came across the realization that actually I don't feel like this all the time. And I'm supposed to go out onto this stage and be this great positive person and do all this sort of amazing thing. But I think, and he came to a point where he just said, I've got to come to the truth of my realization. is that that is not always true.
Mm-hmm.
So is it correct for me to portray this amazing, positive, optimistic side of things? Or do I try and present the balance? And now he very much presents the contrast and the balance. And he talks about looking up to people and looking down on people. And if you look down on somebody, there are going to be some redeeming features that are going to bring them up. And if you look up to somebody, there are going to be some detrimental features that are going to bring them down, that to balance them out. And at the end, we're going to find the balance. And I think that one of a really good point about this is social media, in the fact that so much of the time, I mean, I know that there's a lot of negative stuff on social media, but because I don't follow that and I don't watch it, I don't tend to see it, which makes me very happy. But I also have to be very aware that everybody's, oh my God, I've had an amazing week. I've won this. Oh, I've achieved this. I've done that. I've done this. That's not all the balanced story either. So as a numerological life path of an 8, now that we've talked about numerology before, which is like the study of the numbers where each number between the numbers of 0 and 9 have a meaning, and 8 is all actually about balance, 2 circles, one on top of another. Mm-hmm. So I focus a lot on balance. Doesn't mean, yeah, I think I'm not going to say I've mastered it, but I'm certainly very well aware of it. And it questions me sometimes, the positive psychology crew.
Right.
You know, there's the people that do positive psychology, and I've yet to do the work on it to work out, go, well, where's your balance? You know.
Well, yeah. I mean, I use the positive psychology a bit with my clients, and that the way I use it is that understanding what your natural character strengths are and using them, because some people aren't aware of them. And make sure that you start from that point, because if we don't use our strengths, then we concentrate on our negative. So that's how I see it: as use your strengths, but be aware of your negative, or your weaknesses, and don't get obsessed with your weaknesses. Make sure you're using your strengths. So that's how I see the positive psychology working. And if you're not using them, so one of the exercises I do give my clients to do is pick one of your top 5 and make a diary entry every day as to when you use that strength.
Nice.
And see what picture it gives you and all that sort of stuff. And then another one I give them is to pick one of your weaknesses and consciously use it that day and see what it feels like. You know, just, how did it feel by using that strength instead of your natural strength? Yeah.
And I took that one step. Are you talking about, so the test I did that I really enjoyed actually is the VIA character strengths website, and they give you the 24. And I took in the project that I'm doing on myself at the moment, which I will be rolling out to clients very shortly, is I looked at my top 5 strengths and then looked at my bottom 5 strengths. Remember, bottom 5 strengths, not weaknesses. Bottom 5 strengths, very different.
Yeah. Okay.
And I decided that it would be a good idea to try and use my top 5 strengths to bolster my bottom 5 strengths. So rather than just looking at one and going, right, I'm going in on that one, actually use one of the top 5 to help chivvy it up a little bit.
Yeah.
Because they can change, right?
Absolutely. Yeah. I mean, if you're conscious about these things, you can actually actively change things if you want to. It's firstly, you've got to be actively conscious about them, and then do something that's, you're trying to do something to use them. And being conscious is the key thing. So it's, again, balance is crucial. And I was going to say the number 8, isn't number 8 special for particularly the Chinese? The 8 is sort of symbolic in some way. Anyway, it's just something that I thought I'd mention. It doesn't matter really. Well, has no relevance.
8 has to be the best number of all anyway, doesn't it?
Does it?
Because
you're on. Because it's yours. No idea what my number is, so I can't really comment. But I'm sure it's just a lovely number. Okay, so another topic in the book, which is sort of up my street, is the world is driven by forces that cannot be measured. So it doesn't matter about all the stats, and you can have all the stats and Excel spreadsheets or whatever it is about everything. the thing that we can't measure is how people are feeling about something. So there's an example in the book where they talk about the Vietnam War. So the reason why that was such a disaster for the Americans is they just looked at it on a logical level, and they didn't think about how the people were feeling, the troops that are fighting on behalf of the Americans, and also the way that the Vietnamese actually the attitude they had around the war itself, and that cannot be measured, and which is it's true, and that we can't measure what's actually they're feeling. We can look at all the stats and that, but actually ultimately it's about what someone's feeling at the moment. So the reason why this is interesting to me in particular is that we can now, it used to be the fact that motivation was difficult to sort of ascertain, but now because of this tool that I use, motivation maps, we can measure it, and it's key in that it's an indication with regards to the energy within a team, within a business, and if the motivations are being met and fulfilled in a business, then that tends to mean that there's more energy in the business, and energy means that we are more productive and we get the benefits of having that energy. So one of the key things within a business is, we can't really improve something unless we can measure it. And so if we can measure it, then we can improve it and consciously take action around making sure that it's maintained. And I think another book that I've been reading recently talks about, with a guy called Jim Loher, talks about the importance of energy, and managing energy is key on a personal level and a team level and a business level. If you can maintain energy, then you're always going to be more productive. It doesn't matter about time management. Manage your energy, and that is going to give you the results going forward. So so that's one of the concepts, or one of the chapters is all about the world is driven by forces that cannot be measured. So the more we can measure, then the better, I see.
So I have one question about that.
Mm-hmm.
Going back to the stock market.
Mm-hmm.
Bearing in mind the stock market only goes up and down based on people's opinion and how they feel about things.
Absolutely, yeah.
Like whether I'm going to buy or whether I'm going to sell, whether I'm going to buy or whether I'm going to sell. And I can't answer this categorically, but I do feel that if you spoke to traders, they see general patterns in the markets that happen over and over and over and over again, but then they're not always right. Yeah. No. I think again, the comment that he's made, I think it really does depend how close or how far out you're zoomed.
Mm-hmm.
But
but if you think about a war situation, you can measure everything, and there's certain things you can predict, but you can't predict how the people are feeling, and ultimately that is a key factor in what's going on. It's the same as an athlete. Okay, so we know that sometimes the best athletes sometimes fail, and you think, well, why have they failed? They haven't had a physical injury, so they should be able to perform, but for some reason they don't feel right, whether that's something that's happened in their life, they're just not feeling it today, and you can't measure that. You just know that they're not having an off day, and you just got to accept it, that it's just the way things are. So it's a concept. Again, it's something that you just got to accept, and it's always going to be the same. That there are certain things in life that you can't measure, and you just got to accept them as it is.
Okay, yeah, I get that. All right.
What I was going to say also, you mentioned the stock markets, but it's the same with buying and selling anything. It's only about what people perceive and actually what they feel about what they're buying that matters, and what they want to pay for something. Yes, there's supply and demand, because if there's only one house for sale, you're going to get more than if there's dozens of them. But it's ultimately about what somebody feels about what they're buying, and if they desperately feel that they want this house, they're going to want to pay more for it, because they're almost like emotionally attached. So transactions are interesting with regards to human emotions.
So do I make it really complicated if I say though that there are powers that be like Cambridge Analytica and social and media in general, radio, newspapers, TV, that
Mhm.
can actually very competently drive people into a feeling?
Well, yeah, I mean, we've got to be aware of
Mm.
these things, and this is becoming more and more apparent. And with AI coming more and more into play, it's going to be something that we're going to be really have to be aware of, because
Mm.
outside influences are going to play a big role. I think with all sorts of things going forward. Who knows what is going to come out? But there's going to be some massive stories with regards to AI being, because of the influence of it, it's going to change things, as we know, dramatically as
Yeah,
time goes by. So yeah.
yeah, for sure.
Mm,
For sure. It's very interesting, isn't it?
mm,
It is. I mean, the thing is, these little pearls.
mm.
I think what's so nice about them, I think there's 23 chapters, aren't there? Are there 23 little stories in the book?
I'll just check that for you. Something
What?
like that, I think. 23 little stories about things that never change. Yes, indeed.
Yeah, so what's so interesting about them is I think is that each one is such a good dinner party conversation.
Yes.
Because it really does depend on, you know, if somebody comes out of a changing room in a shop wearing a dress and asks me my opinion, I'm going to look at it, and nobody can predict how much I like it or how much I don't like it, right? So on
Mm-hmm.
that level, that story is completely true. However, let's say, for instance, there's been a huge thing in the media, and for some reason, brown dresses are totally out. And I've read that. And then the same lady's in there and she comes out of the changing room wearing a brown dress. I could be influenced not just by my feelings and the fact that I'm automatically going to say, oh, no, I don't like that. It's brown. So it just depends, doesn't it? Where you shine the spotlight on it, where you put the focus on it.
Mm-hmm.
And I think it's very simplistic to say an athlete has an on day, an off day, or an on day, or whatever.
Mm-hmm.
Recently watched the documentary on Netflix about David Beckham,
Mm-hmm.
and it's fascinating going through that and looking at him and how the outside influences affected his play and affected the crowd and affected this. It's really a good perspective, good example on it.
Mm-hmm.
So I don't know. I feel like I want to just go, oh yeah, that's really good. But actually, this book, with you describing it to me, is actually pushing a few of my buttons.
In what way?
Well, just in the fact that I want to challenge.
Well, maybe I'm not describing it particularly well. So maybe you need to read the book and then you get your own perspective.
Yeah.
That's the
Or
trouble
maybe
with
I'm,
me having my own sort of describing it in a way that might be completely different. When you read it, you might see different things in
yeah,
it than me.
maybe I'm just feeling a bit feisty today.
I think you probably are. Yeah, I feel you're a bit feisty today. Um, but as we're going to the end of our little 30-minute session, we'll pick another one just to sort of round things off, and that is the first rule of happiness is low expectations. What do you think of that one?
Bang on.
Well,
Honestly,
yeah,
because it's down to gratitude, isn't it? It's
mhm,
down to actually realizing that in order to be happy, all you have to do is just be.
that's right. Accept what you've already
And
got
I
and not be striving for things that maybe isn't your time to have, or it's not. Actually, you might say that certain things might enhance your life, but actually when you get them, it might not make any difference whatsoever. So
No,
yeah.
so having been somebody who thought that wealth was going to make me happy and solve all my problems, and realizing that's not, I'm also listening to the Matthew Perry book at the moment, which is he basically said to God, I don't care what you do with half of my life, but just make me famous.
Yeah.
And when he did get famous, it just didn't solve the problems at all. So, and I'm having been somebody who was one of these people that felt terribly lonely and was constantly looking for something outside of myself, with all the work that I've been doing on myself in the last few years, that view was absolutely changed, excuse the cat, 100%. So what was the phrase again?
The phrase was first rule of happiness is low expectations.
Yeah, I would even say no expectation.
Yeah. I think you're right, and that's the trouble with everything that we do. We expect something to happen. If you take that expectation away and you do it for this, almost for the sake of doing it, as opposed to the result, then ultimately that's going to not take take the pressure off for a start. And it's amazing when you haven't got the pressure on how you things happen naturally. It's when people
Yeah,
are desperate to make a sale, you know that they're desperate to make a sale, and then you get that energy and then you don't make the sale. And I've again had that many a time on both instances when I wanted to make a sale and I knew the energy wasn't right, and vice versa when I'm maybe trying to thinking about buying something and then ended up not doing it because there was just too much pressure or the energy wasn't right. So it's a good lesson to I think it's a perfect thing to end on, really, to be honest. And the expectations, we can get carried away by them, I think.
I think we can. I
Mm.
really do think we can.
Yeah.
It reminds me of, just very quickly, it just reminds me of, I went to see a chap at live, and it's called something like the Piano Player of Kitutsk or something.
Mm-hmm.
And this chap who was in Syria, and oh my goodness, some of the photographs, and it was literally just devastation completely around him.
Mm-hmm.
And he found a piano, and he started to play this piano. He was playing this piano, he played it absolutely beautifully. But people would gather round to listen to this piano, and it was like that's what they had, and the happiness that came from something that, I don't know, it was just a beautiful image, and a really beautiful story that just, you're in this place where you literally will go, right, okay, my life is now completely over. I am like, I have nothing. I literally have nothing. But actually, what do I do have? I've got my family, I have got something to eat, and I have got something to, and now I've got this music,
Mm.
which probably it was accentuated a millionfold purely because it was just such a massive thing in such a devastating environment.
Brilliant.
Amazing.
Well, thank you, Fanny. Really enjoyed it. 30 minutes flown by. If you catch this on the replay, then feel free to leave some comments. We'd love to hear from you. Sorry if you've been leaving comments live. Unfortunately, we can't. I can't see them, so we can't reply or get you involved in the conversation, unfortunately. But we will reply to any comments, and we love any contribution. When we do these things, there's no great big plan around these little chats about motivation and money, but we just like doing them, don't we, Fanny? That's the
We
point.
do. We do.
So we do it for that reason only. So there
Mm.
we are. So for now, I think we should just say cheerio. Have a great week. We don't know when the next one of these will be, but hopefully you can join us and hope you got some value from this. And so for me, it's goodbye. And Fanny?
Be happy. Be happy.
And be happy from Fanny. See you next time.